The wind swept across the open plains like a ghostly hymn, carrying the scent of dust, leather, and wild sage. Inside a small wooden chapel stood a man, tall, rugged, carved from years of silence and survival. His name was known across counties, the cowboy who never bent, never begged, never broke. But tonight, beneath the soft flicker of candlelight, something inside him trembled. This was his wedding night. 4 years. He'd worked the land alone, his heart hardened like the earth under his boots. He told himself he didn't need tenderness, didn't need love. Yet deep down, he had always longed for something pure, untouched by the world's cruelty. That was why he had chosen her, a woman known for her innocence, for her quiet grace. A woman unmarked by the pain and deceit he had seen in others. The vows came slow from his lips, his voice thick with nerves he didn't show. Around them, a few townsfolk watched, whispering behind calloused hands. Some doubted him, said a man like that had no business marrying purity. But when she lifted her gaze toward him, calm and sure, all doubts melted away. Her eyes carried peace, a kind of light he didn't think existed anymore. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the cowboy's chest tightened, not from pride, but from fear. He'd faced storms, bullets, and betrayal, but never a woman who could undo him with one look. As they rode back to the ranch, the world seemed to fall into silence. The moon cast a pale glow across the fields, painting everything in silver and shadow. She sat behind him on the horse, quiet, steady, her presence almost unreal. He felt her heartbeat through the leather saddle, a rhythm both fragile and strong. By the time they reached the old wooden house, his pulse had turned into a storm. Inside, the firelight danced across the room, throwing soft colors on the walls. He poured himself a drink, his hands shaking slightly. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, not realizing his words were for himself. She moved closer, unhurried, unafraid. Her silence spoke louder than words. He looked at her, really looked, and something deep within him shifted. He had imagined this night 1,000 ways. Thought he'd be in control, certain, strong. But when her eyes met his, the world fell away. The strength that carried him through years of loneliness began to crumble. He saw not a fragile bride, but a soul unbroken, radiant in its calm. She didn't reach for him with hesitation, but with understanding, and that broke him more than any rejection could. The cowboy stepped back, his breath uneven. Memories flooded him, the day he buried his mother. The nights he spent under the stars swearing never to trust again. The faces of those who'd left him when he needed them most. All his life, he had been the man who took charge, of cattle, of men, of his own fate. But now, standing before her, he felt powerless. Not because he couldn't act, but because for the first time, he didn't want to. He didn't want to take. He wanted to learn. Her voice was gentle when she finally spoke. "You built your life on strength," she said, "but love doesn't need strength. It needs surrender." The words hit him like thunder. His breath caught. His hands dropped to his sides. He'd thought purity meant weakness, that innocence needed protection. But now he saw it was the other way around. She wasn't fragile. She was fearless. She didn't need saving. She was there to save him. As he knelt before her, his rough hands trembling, she placed her palm against his chest. Beneath her touch, his heart beat fast and uneven, struggling to understand the softness it had long forgotten. The silence between them filled with meaning, not lust, not fear, but connection. The fire crackled behind them, and outside, the night stretched endless and holy. The cowboy closed his eyes, letting go of everything he'd ever known about manhood, power, and pride. That night wasn't what anyone in town imagined. There was no passion forced by desire, no rush of conquest. Instead, there was stillness. Healing. She didn't teach him the ways of the body. She taught him the ways of the heart, that love isn't something you win, but something you receive when you're finally brave enough to stop fighting it. By morning, the cowboy sat on the porch, watching the sunrise spill gold across the horizon. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about work, or land, or revenge. He was thinking about peace, the kind that doesn't come from strength, but from surrender. The kind only love can bring, the morning after that quiet awakening. The cowboy woke before dawn as usual. But something in the air had changed. The ranch felt softer, calmer, alive in a way it hadn't been for years. The sound of the wind through the grass didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like music. When he walked to the porch, coffee in hand, he saw her standing at the edge of the corral, feeding the horses. She wasn't speaking, wasn't singing. But her presence filled the space like sunlight after a long storm. For a moment, he simply watched her, wondering how someone so gentle could survive in a world as harsh as his. But then he realized, maybe she wasn't surviving it. Maybe she was changing it. He worked that day with a strange lightness in his chest. The land seemed less heavy beneath his boots. The cattle obeyed with ease. Yet all through the morning, her image kept flashing in his mind, the calm in her eyes, the steadiness of her hands. When he rode back at noon, she had lunch ready on the table. He mumbled his thanks, sitting opposite her, both of them quiet. Then, out of nowhere, she looked at him and said softly, "You don't have to prove anything anymore." He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. She continued, "You've been fighting so long you forgot what peace feels like. But you can stop now." Her words lingered in his head all day. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, he sat by the fire while she read from an old book. Her voice, low, clear, and full of warmth, wove through the room like the sound of rain after drought. He didn't understand most of what she read, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the peace that came with it, the kind he'd never known. When she finished, she closed the book and looked at him. "You're thinking too much," she said with a faint smile. "Love doesn't live in the head. It lives in the quiet places." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I ain't good at this." "Never been." She tilted her head slightly. "At what?" "At caring. At feeling." She smiled again, this time sadder, softer. "That's the point, cowboy. You don't learn to feel, you just stop running from it." Her words burned through him all night. When he finally slept, his dreams were full of memories, his father's harsh voice, the loneliness of long rides, the echo of empty rooms. But woven through them was her voice, calm and steady, calling him home. The next morning, trouble came in the form of a broken fence and a stray bull tearing through the field. He rode out fast, shouting orders to his men, muscles burning with adrenaline. By the time they wrangled the beast back, he was exhausted, drenched in sweat and dust. Yet when he returned, she was waiting on the porch with a towel and a quiet smile. "Rough day?" she asked. He nodded, taking the towel, his eyes softening as they met hers. She didn't say anything else, didn't need to. That small act of care hit deeper than any words could. For a man who had faced storms, it was the gentleness that finally broke him. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, he began to talk, really talk. About his childhood, his fears, the guilt he'd buried. She never interrupted, never pitted, only listened. And in her silence, he found something sacred, understanding. One night, as they sat outside under a sky heavy with stars, he said quietly, "I thought I wanted a woman who'd obey me. Someone I could protect. But you," he stopped, searching for the right words. She waited. "You don't need. You make me want to be better." Her smile in that moonlight was the gentlest truth he'd ever seen. She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Maybe love isn't about who's stronger," she whispered. "Maybe it's about who's willing to grow." That night, when he kissed her, slow, trembling, unsure, it wasn't passion that filled him, but gratitude. Gratitude for being seen, for being forgiven. For finally understanding that love doesn't demand perfection, only honesty. When morning came, the cowboy stood by the fence, watching the sunrise over the hills. The world looked the same, but he didn't. For the first time, he wasn't chasing something or hiding from something. He was simply there. A man learning, a heart healing, a soul reborn.